If you did 7 hours of walking a week, so if you did an hour a day of walking, but you did it briskly, you're going to burn about 500 calories an hour, or you could. It depends on how brisk you go. And you could burn 1 pound in a week if you did 7 hours of walking. So just walking alone is really pretty good exercise. Let's talk about sleep for a minute. You need to sleep. You need to sleep about 8 hours, about 8 to 9 hours. When they do studies, they find people that don't sleep very much or work night shifts actually have more body fat. Not getting enough sleep increases some stress hormones, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and those can attribute more poundage to you. Those who don't get enough sleep have the higher body fat, and there's no such thing actually as catching up on sleep. I mean, you may be so sleep deprived that on a day off you sleep a lot, but you shouldn't think during the week you don't sleep very much and then you try to catch up on sleep. Your body doesn't really operate that well. In fact, if you're watching your weight, the best thing to do is get into routines of sleep, exercise, eating, do everything the same. When they've looked at people who live a long time, they generally have routines that are very set. They don't vary a lot from them. In terms of working out, actually it turns out that if you work out around 6 o'clock in the evening, you get the most metabolic burn at about 6 o'clock in the evening. That may not be possible. For me, I've got to pretty much work out in the morning. Sometimes I work out in the evening, but generally I come home from work and I'm kind of tired and it's not a time when I really feel like working out, although when I do, I usually feel better. But you need about 3 hours before you go to bed, because the body stays warm for about 3 hours, and we're going to talk about why that's important. And if you, in order to get good sleep, it's better if your body is a little bit cooler. I think a lot of postmenopausal women find out they need to sleep in a cooler room in order to sleep well. They're getting up a lot. You want to actually warm up before you stretch. So the old adage was to stretch before you exercise. It turns out if you don't warm up your muscles, your muscles are somewhat contracted and they're cold, and you're more prone to injury if you stretch when your muscles are cold. So if you even warm up 3 to 5 minutes on something aerobic, that's good enough. And then what you should do is then do your exercise after that. You can stretch at the end of your routine, but it's better to stretch when your muscles are warm. People know that, don't they? I mean, that's kind of been knowledge for about the last 5 years. Okay, let's talk about how to make exercise really efficient. So a lot of people belong to a gym, and the old adage has been, go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, and that's adequate, right? But actually, exercise should be daily. Our bodies are really designed to exercise on a daily basis. I always say, think back, you guys kept seeing my slide pop up on Caveman metabolism. We're going to get to that. But we really, as an organism, as a biological organism, we're designed to be active on a daily basis. And the other thing is, here we go into the busy lifestyle, it actually turns out the less exercise you do, the smarter you do it, you can get a lot more benefit. How many people have heard of interval training? Okay. How many people have heard of this thing called high-intensity interval training? Okay. Circuit training, like they do at CrossFit. Well, it turns out that if you do exercises that vary your intensity, you're actually going to get more metabolic burn. And so HIIT in its purest form, takes an exercise like biking or running, like on a treadmill, and they have you alternate periods of doing a minute of moderate intensity and a minute of high intensity. In its purest form, and there's variations of it, you're actually warming up for about 3 to 5 minutes, okay? So for me, I get on the elliptical, I warm up for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you do an interval where you do a full-out effort for a full minute, and then you do a minute of kind of moderate and then a minute of full-out effort. If you do that for 20 minutes, first of all, it'd be really hard to do, and I would say that most of us in this room probably couldn't do it without falling off the treadmill. It's really hard to do. You're going to get an incredible metabolic burn. Also, some research done about 10 years ago was really interesting to me. We found that when people exercise, I think, we've all had the experience of getting on a treadmill or something that has a calorie monitor on it, and you're exercising, and at the end of it, you look down and it says you burned 35 calories. You're like, wow, 3 M&Ms? Really? And it's really discouraging. But what actually happens is that when you exercise, your metabolic rate goes up, and it stays up while you exercise, but when you stop, it doesn't go back down to your pre-exercise level. In fact, it tapers off. It's called a recovery phase. Well, you can use that to your advantage because they did a study at one time, this was about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even been a little bit longer, where they took people and they took one group and they did 30 minutes of exercise, and the other group did 3 10-minute sessions of exercise in a day. And they found that the metabolic burn for the people doing the 3 10-minute increments was greater than the person doing the 30-minute increment. And why was that? Because in the 10-minute increment, you still had a recovery phase. And when you linked all those recovery phases together, what happened in the end is that you actually ended up having more metabolic burn. So,
Well, can you explain metabolic rate and metabolic burn?
Yeah,
What is that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So basically, Klaus, when you exercise, your metabolic rate goes up, okay?
Heart rate?
Well, your metabolic rate is your heart rate goes up, your body becomes warmer, and everything speeds up, and you use your fuel. You use more fuel, okay? So you burn fat, you burn energy, you burn your energy stores. Okay, so a lot of people, especially as we get older and we tend to have a tendency to gain fat, and we'll talk about why that is also. If we can get our metabolic rate to remain higher longer, we're going to be more efficient, we're going to use calories more efficient, and all of a sudden we're overall using more calories up. So it's a way that you can maintain your weight. But it also turns out it's a way to increase your fitness. And so if you're doing shorter increments, you're varying the intensity, you're going to increase your fitness faster. If you're doing shorter episodes but more frequent and sporadic, you're going to increase your fitness. So the old go to the gym, get on the treadmill, read a magazine, and watch your heart rate monitor, and do that for 45 minutes really isn't very efficient. And one of the things that people used to come in and tell me, or they still do in the office, is they come in and, I'm so frustrated, I can't lose any weight. And, I don't eat that much, and I exercise every single day. And we doctors, quite frankly, we go, yeah, right, okay. But you know what? They were right. They weren't, well, some people, weren't telling us the truth. But most people, what was happening is that as you begin to lose weight, your body at some point catches on that you're trying to lose weight. How many people have experienced the dreaded plateau? Okay? And when does that occur? It occurs maybe after about 8 weeks of weight loss. Doesn't it seem like you start on a diet, you lose weight, and after a while, it settles down? And so what do most people do? They start eating less, and they kick up the exercise. Okay? But what's happening is that the body is all of a sudden saying, you're losing weight, that's a threat to me. You're going to die. if you continue to lose weight. And so it's meeting you calorie for calorie in terms of the exercise. It's fighting you. So let me take that and go into what I call caveman metabolism. So I talk about caveman metabolism a lot, and I'm really sorry all my slides aren't working, but and caveman metabolism is, if we think back 1 million years ago when man was very primitive, as an organism, we came into the world and we adapted to a world that didn't always have food readily available. And as a result, we had very efficient ways of storing fat so that if we had times of lean, we could use it. We would be able to draw from our fat stores and get through cold winters and times of lean food. When food wasn't very available, we had these appetite hormones, which were discovered in the last decade. Leptin, ghrelin, you guys have heard of those, maybe you haven't, but they're appetite hormones. And so when you go on a really low-calorie diet, and you do that for about 3 days, and you've alienated your loved ones and your friends because you're so horrible, and then you go and you eat everything in sight, well, what's happened is you've had these appetite hormones which have soared to 20 to 30 times what they would be at a normal level. And the reason they do that is it's an adaptation. Okay, so if you were creating this biological organism, okay, and it came into a world without a lot of food available, what would you want that organism to do? Okay, so primitive man, to do in the middle of winter. Okay, well what he wants to do is he wants to sit in front of his cave on his butt and eat everything in sight. We still want to do that. We want to sit on our butts and eat everything in sight. And we really are kind of programmed for that. But if a rabbit runs by or there's a berry growing on a bush, we want to eat it. So we have these appetites, that make us desire to go after food. Okay, well then what happens, spring comes and we go on a big hunt and we kill a woolly mammoth, and all of a sudden we've got a ton of food available. Well, the body's got to mobilize to go on the hunt. So how does the body mobilize? All those fat stores are mobilized, and what I mean by mobilized is they're converted into energy. So what's the fight or flight response? The fight or flight response is how we respond to stress, how we go out and we, fight the woolly mammoth or the saber-tooth tiger, or in these days, how we respond to just, our modern world stresses, which give us that same sort of response. Well, our heart rate starts going faster. Glucose is drawn out of our fats, converted into glucose, sent into our bloodstream, so we've got an energy source. Okay, so then we go and we kill the woolly mammoth, and all that fat now that we've eaten, all the food that we've eaten, the excess calories now get stored away as fat. The problem is, in modern day world, we don't really have a lot of times when we're really truly starved. And so we have a lot of food available, and so our body wants to still store fat. It doesn't really know that around the corner we still have food available. It doesn't know that we're not going to have times of starvation. So what your body also does is when you begin to lose weight, your appetite hormones go up, your body slows your metabolism down, okay? And it slows your metabolism down because it's just interpreted that as, it doesn't want you to lose weight. Why do women, when they're athletes and they're exercising really hard, stop having their periods? Well, it kind of makes sense, from an evolutionary standpoint, that you wouldn't want that biological creature to get pregnant in a time of starvation. So the body says, wow, this person is needing all this energy. I don't want it to get pregnant. Women aren't very fertile when they're breastfeeding. I mean, you wouldn't want another pregnancy in a primitive world to occur when a woman was breastfeeding. And the same thing occurs when you're losing weight, and the body is going to hang on to those calories. Okay, so it adapts. So one of the things you can do when we're talking about the varying intensities of exercise is that when you're varying your exercise and you're throwing curveballs at your body, it's not adapting. It's just responding to that, but it's not getting into a rut. And so the interval training is what is really going to increase your fitness. And the beauty of it is, and how it fits into the busy lifestyle, is you don't have to do that much. So, you know, if you really hate to exercise, and I have people who come in and they go, I won't, I hate it. You know, they're just miserable. And I tell them, can we get you exercising 10 minutes a day? And when they still won't even do that, then I tell them, you know, you got to do it first thing in the morning. Do it in the morning, pay yourself first. Have you ever heard that term, you know, when it talk about money, pay yourself first? So pay yourself first with exercise in the morning. So get up and do it in the morning, chalk it off, and you're done. But if you did 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, and you did those intervals, so warm up 3 minutes, do your intervals, and then do your stretching and your whatever, and we'll talk about weightlifting here in a minute. But you're going to have a lot more efficient exercise, you're going to feel good, and remember those recovery phases, Klaus, again. So what happens is your metabolic rate, your heart rate, how you're burning fuel goes up, and then it gradually goes back down, and if you're linking two of those together, you're getting a better workout than the same amount of time during a constant phase. Does that make sense? People heard this before? Some of you probably have. Yeah. So, you know, voila, us lazy butts now don't really have an excuse. I mean, you can do it. And trust me, I put myself in that category. Weightlifting. Weightlifting is really important. You know, I've often heard, you know, people say, well, as I get older, I've just gotten fatter and I don't eat anything. You know, and again, you know, we used to wonder about the truthfulness of a person, but your metabolic rate does tend to drop. You slow down as you get older. And, you know, a lot of that's been blamed on menopause, you know, in women, but, you know, or it's just age. And there are things that happen to your body as you age. One, you have a master hormone, DHEA. Anybody heard of DHEA? DHEA is like the hormone that then goes into your testosterone, your estrogens, and all of that. And DHEA keeps our body fat, like our abdominal fat, lower when we're younger. And when we get older, we lose that and we accumulate more belly fat. So anybody seen, you know, the really elderly woman who's been thin her whole life, but now she's got a belly, and you kind of wonder why that is. And that's because we increase our abdominal fat. Well, before you all go out and buy DHEA and start taking it, you should read some of the research that says basically if you take it orally, it's broken down in your liver, and you don't really get any. So until we figure out ways to really give people DHEA in a way that it can't be absorbed, it's just not going to help you to go to the supplement store. And in case anybody has questions on growth hormone, all I have to say is we use growth hormone for instances of deficiency, but the jury's a little bit out on its safety in terms of an anti-aging product. And when I say the jury's out, it just means we need a little more research before, you know, people start thinking that that's incredibly safe. So let's talk about weightlifting, because one of the things you want to do is keep your muscles strong as you get older. We talked about you get more belly fat, but you also get more fat the rest of the place in your body. You know, people get the bat wings under their arms. And what happens is the muscle doesn't turn into fat. A tissue like muscle doesn't convert to fat. But what happens is the muscle breaks down and shrinks, and that space is just replaced by fat. We get fatter, and it just happens to go to those areas, but the muscle doesn't actually convert to fat. But the muscle, if you look at it under the microscope, will look a little bit like a marbled steak, and you'll start getting fat in between the muscle fibers, just like a steak does. Not very pretty. So what we really want to do is we want to keep our muscle up. And the most common cause of knee pain, what do you guys think it is? Arthritis? Overuse? That's what everybody thinks. It's quadricep weakness. And there was a recent study, actually just this last week, that was looking at falls in the elderly. And what they found is they always thought that falls in the elderly, and I thought this too, were people tripping over things or slipping, so tripping and slipping. That's what happened to the elderly. Well, it turns out that most falls in the elderly are due to balance. They lose their balance. And when they lose their balance, they just topple over. And then, you know, if you have osteoporosis and things like that, it can be dreadful. Well, it turns out also that most knee pain is actually due to just quadriceps weakness. So one of the best exercises you can do is plain old squats. And you can do squats at home. In fact, I'm going to give you a bunch of exercises that you could just do at home. So what I've started doing with my elderly patients is I'm having them put stacks of pillows on chairs and just start there and try and get up. In fact, one of the things I usually do with elderly patients is I see how they get out of a chair. And I watch how they get out of the chair. Do they push out? How do they climb on the exam room table? And what I find is that it's weakness. And walking isn't going to make your quads strong. You got to use them. I mean, if you're skiers, you know that. You got to get your quads strong. So squats are going to use your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings. It's one of your best exercises that you can do. Lunges, you know, where everybody know what lunges are? Okay. So lunges use the same muscles, but it also incorporates balance. Push-ups, chest, shoulders, triceps. If you have bat wings under your arms, do push-ups. One of the best things you can do. Another, crunches. So sit-ups are kind of passe. I don't think anybody does them anymore because they can hurt your back. And so crunches, you're just laying down and you're bringing yourself up into a crunch and working your abs. The bent over row, like this, working your back, your lats. The plank, which is essentially the position that you would do in a push-up, but holding that. And lat pulls. And I have a bar at home that I can do lat bars. In fact, my whole gym is at my home. I own a gym, but it's in Cameron Park. But anyway, I'm very convenient. Anyway, so your body hurts and your joints hurt. Most of the time, it's because you're out of shape. Arthritis will hurt, but arthritis will feel better if you exercise. So the old adage, you know, we used to tell people if your knees hurt, oh, don't use them, you know, take it easy, your knees are getting old, you have arthritis. But actually the new adage is if your knees hurt, go out and use them, and especially make your quads strong. Because it turns out if they looked at people who don't do exercise because their knees hurt, they actually tend to get heavier, they get more arthritis because they have more stress on their knees, and they actually end up with knee replacements more often or sooner than the person who exercises and uses their knees and stays fit. You know, that's not always the case. If you're a real, you know, heavy-duty athlete, you may end up with, you know, a joint replacement just because you've used it hard, but you're certainly going to be a lot healthier. And also, exercise is an anti-inflammatory, just a natural one. Anyway, so if you hurt, do it. Now, going back to, remember my kinesiology background, one of the things that we have found is when I tell people to go to the gym, you know, anybody can walk into a gym and you can have a whole wall of machines, and those are great, because basically you don't usually have to know a lot. You can get on a machine and start pushing and pulling and feel like you've gotten a really good workout. Machines are really good because they're going to isolate a muscle. When they isolate a muscle, you're going to be able to usually put more stress on that muscle. So you can build up that individual muscle pretty quickly. But you really should do free weights as well. And you really should work on form. And if you don't know, anybody who lifts weights knows all about form. But you know, when I'm talking about squats, it's important to do the form right. Bring your hips forward. You want to stay over your heels. If you're bending over and doing them, that's not as good. Form can make a big difference. The same thing if you go in and you're going to do anything with free weights. You want to have somebody work with you on form. But why are free weights good? Because when you lift free weights, you're also using muscles of balance. Okay, so all of a sudden, you're engaging these smaller muscles. You go over and you pick it up, and those actually help protect the joints, having all of those muscles that support and protect the joints. I see a lot of people with shoulder pain, what we call impingement. And impingement usually is just due to a weak shoulder girdle. You all know about the rotator cuff, the four muscles that hold the shoulder in. But if you don't use them and keep them strong, you really can almost kind of get little mini dislocations in there, and you can get tendinitises and problems like that. And so keeping all those muscles strong is going to support the joint. You're going to have less arthritis and less pain. One of the things people ask me about is, what about anti-inflammatories? And anti-inflammatories, you can use Advil, Aleve, and if you're going to go out and exercise, those aren't so bad to take beforehand. And people worry about their liver or their kidneys. Well, Aleve and Advil, the biggest risk is to your kidneys. So you shouldn't take a lot of them for a long time because they can be hard on your kidneys. Tylenol has a bit of an anti-inflammatory effect. Interestingly enough, we don't really quite understand the pathway in the body that creates the anti-inflammatory effect in Tylenol. But it's not quite as strong as Advil, Aleve, which are naproxen and ibuprofen, by the way. Those are the generic names. And then there are actually some supplements that are natural anti-inflammatories. Well, interestingly enough, one of them being white pine bark, let me give you a list, is where aspirin comes from. So there's a lot of things that are out there that are natural anti-inflammatories that really have been shown to work. Let me see if I can find them in here. I actually wish my slides were working. Because some of you might want to take some notes on them. Turmeric is one of them. White willow bark, where aspirin comes from. Omega-3 fatty acids, so fish oil have some anti-inflammatory effects. Green tea, cat's claw, resveratrol, which is in grapes and in wine. We'll talk about wine here in a minute. Frankincense and maritime pine bark. In fact, why don't we talk about wine right now? So, one of the things I've found interesting is how much a big industry that makes a lot of money can sway public opinion on something being healthy. You all hear that it's healthy to drink a glass of wine. Well, alcohol, just alcohol, okay, whether it's in beer or any form, has a little bit of an effect on making your red blood cells less sticky, like aspirin does. Has a little bit of an anti-platelet effect. But really, the big bennies in wine are the flavonoids and the resveratrol. What actually gives it the color, which is the same thing that's in blueberries and grapes. So you don't really have to have the wine. You could just have colorful vegetables and fruits, okay. I have an EMT friend. He's actually at SWAT and EMT, and he says, I've just never seen a bad situation made better by alcohol. So, alcohol definitely has its downsides, but you can get, if you don't drink, you can get the same health benefits by eating, those different colors in your fruits and vegetables. Okay, so kind of enough on exercise except for one last thing, heart rate monitors. Anybody who comes to see me and we talk about exercise knows I kind of generally don't like them. The reason I don't like them is that if you aren't really in very good shape, and I put you on a treadmill and I made you run, your heart rate, if you're not in good shape, is going to go up really quickly. And that's because your heart is a muscle, and as a muscle, it's not very toned. So we all know about the athletic heart, the rate is slower, the pump is strong, and the rate is slower. So a heart that isn't in very good shape is going to go faster, not be as strong, but it's going to go faster to make up for the fact that it doesn't have a really good pump. So in other words, have you been to the gym and you've seen the person reading a magazine on the treadmill, or they're watching the TV and they're watching their heart rate monitor, but they haven't broken a sweat? I hope it hit them. Anyway, they're not really working out. Because if you go by a heart rate monitor and you're not fit, you're going to under-exercise. So there's another way you can measure exercise. It's called the intensity scale. And the intensity scale is 0, you just woke up, you're half comatose in bed, or 10, that's that all-out effort that maybe you're doing during your intervals, where you're going to quickly go into an anaerobic state and not be able to do it for very long. So a 7 to 8, and how you would measure a 7 to 8, I always say you're walking along, say you're walking up Myers grade, and you're talking to your friend, and you're breathless. You can talk to them, but you don't really feel like having a very long conversation because you're a little bit breathless, but you're not so breathless you have to stop and catch your breath, but you're pretty breathless. You're sweating a little bit, lightly, your heart rate's going, you're breathing hard. So that's about a 7 to 8, and that's actually really a good intensity level we usually exercise at. So heart rate monitors, they're really for athletes that are making fine-tuning to their regimen because they've got a very toned heart. It's going to be more important in them. And people recovering from cardiac issues, we use them a lot. We'll use heart rate because we want to keep their heart rate within a certain level. So that's my spiel on heart rate. Yes?
Could you discuss the importance or non-importance of heavier versus lighter weights when you're doing?
Yeah, okay, so, and that's good, thanks for bringing that up. So, you know, there are these things called weenie weights. Weenie weights are those little toning weights. Remember how we used to tone our muscles? Because we women didn't want to have big muscles because then we look like guys. Well, in actuality, women don't usually get big, bulky muscles because of our hormones and because we have more body fat than men naturally. And so we usually don't get big, huge muscles, but when we do, personally, I think women that are muscular look great. But if you're using heavier weights, you're going to stress a muscle more and you're going to make the muscle bigger. So generally when you're doing sets, like you're going in and say you're doing squats and you're doing it with the weight. So you put the weight on and you want to be able to do about 6 to 8 repetitions of that weight. So at 8 you're kind of tired and then you rest a minute and then you do another set and you do another set with heavier weights. It's really much better than just doing lots and lots of repetitions with a lighter weight. Lighter weight bands are pretty good. They're a good example of a lighter weight. And those are pretty good. Like I'll do band work where I'm just, you know, kind of doing this. I'm just trying to strengthen those muscles, but I'm not trying to really bulk them up and really trying to make them a lot stronger. So there's different ways to do it. So heavier weights, and people always say to me, well, what do you mean by heavy? Well, it depends. I mean, maybe you can go and pick up, you know, a 45-pound bar without weights on it, but maybe a woman can't, and she's got to use a lighter bar. So, you know, that would be kind of the difference. So let's talk about how to eat healthy. This is another one of my favorite subjects. I want to teach you how to be a wise consumer tonight because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and Whole Foods is not necessarily your friend. Unfortunately, I went on a sea kayaking trip, and who did I end up on a sea kayaking trip with? But one of the big wigs in Whole Foods. And we didn't see eye to eye. 8 days we're out on kayaks going to these islands, you know, I'm with this guy. He didn't like me and I didn't like him, and we didn't stay in touch afterwards. But my problem with Whole Foods and the whole organic thing is it leads people astray a little bit. But the biggest issue I have with it is it's expensive. And you know, in Boulder, where one of the first Whole Foods went in, we called it Whole Paycheck, and that was really And I would see people that would come in and say, I'm really healthy, I buy everything at Whole Foods. But you don't necessarily have to. You need to understand labeling a little bit. Things can be marked as organic, but not the whole thing may be organic. And organic means that it was grown in such a way there weren't added pesticides to it, and they weren't using, you know, a lot of fertilizer, and they were using natural fertilizer. And, you know, it's a much cleaner practice and way of farming, so I don't have a problem with that. But you need to realize that some things it really doesn't matter if you eat organic. And I had a whole list here, but you can easily find this information on the internet. Look up foods to eat organic and things not to eat organic. And let me just give you a few examples here. Some of the foods that it doesn't matter at all if you eat organic are onions, sweet corn, so don't buy them organic, don't waste your money, pineapple, avocado, cabbage, sweet peas, watermelon, asparagus, mangoes, kiwi, cantaloupe, sweet potatoes, grapefruit, mushrooms, and broccoli. Okay? But the ones that you really do want to buy organic, and I do think you should buy organic because they have a lot of pesticide on them. They have pesticide residue that's hard to get off. And some of the pesticide is somewhat taken up by the plant. Are apples, peaches, grapes, celery, potatoes. That was a new one that kind of came out recently. Bell peppers, strawberries, imported nectarines, spinach, lettuce, but not cabbage, cucumber, blueberries, beans, and kale. Now, organic does not mean it doesn't have pesticide on it. Does anybody know why? Because there aren't little organic trucks running around. Most of your produce is actually, and I've looked this up, I spent quite a bit of time, you know, I try to research things before I talk about them so somebody doesn't call me on them later. But there is pesticide residue in your organic produce. You're going to have far less of it. So wash your food. My husband thinks I'm nuts because I wash everything. I wash avocados, I wash bananas. I throw it in the sink, I take it out, it goes in the dish drainer, and then it gets put away. And what else does food have on it? It has bacteria on it. And so, you know, do people with colds and flu not go to the grocery store? No, of course they do. And they're feeling the same fruits and vegetables you are and grabbing the same things.
What are you washing it with?
I wash mine with just dish soap. There are vegetable washes which are supposed to be better for, you know, getting in there and getting that residue off.
You don't wash a strawberry with dish soap.
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Yeah. I just rinse it off.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure we get a little bit of soap once in a while, but, you know, I'm not a gourmet cook. I mean, there probably are better things, but, you know, I do.
Not just water.
No, I don't usually rinse with water. I use soap.
Yeah.
And I'll use warm water, too. I mean, I really believe in washing your produce. I mean, people are touching it. They're not washing their hands. I mean, grocery stores are pretty dirty, really. You know, and that's not a commentary on our grocery stores. It's just that, you know, that's where everybody goes and they're sick. And there is pesticide residue. You know, so you want to clean your food. It's really one of the best things you can do. Is just wash your damn food.
Do you dip it in the soap, rinse it up?
I wash it. I don't stick it in the dishwasher. Anyway, my husband isn't here. No, I haven't. I really haven't. But you know, just wash it. Wash your food. And so another area where
Broccoli. You're going to wash broccoli with dish
I
soap?
wash broccoli. I wash bananas. I wash cantaloupe. Yeah, I
That's
wash.
outside. It's got a big hard on the
I
outside.
know,
and
but what's
it's
on
in
it? Yeah, but what do? You're touching the banana and the bacteria, and you're
Yeah.
peeling it.
Yeah.
I mean, are you really careful where you pick
I know, but a
bananas?
strawberry doesn't have, you know, you eat the whole strawberry. Cantaloupe, you only eat what's inside.
Yeah, but you take the knife and you take it through
Put
there,
it
so
on
you
the
take the
table
bacteria
and
through
with
there.
the skin first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
cantaloupe's been contaminated with salmonella before, and people
I know, I
have
just
sick.
understand the broccoli and the strawberry.
Yeah, and the
That's okay.
salmonella isn't
I'll
in
get
the
it.
cantaloupe, it's coming through when somebody cuts it through the skin.
Yeah.
I mean, take it for what you want. I mean, I know a lot of people think I'm crazy, but.
No, I agree
think
with
you should.
washing the watermelons and the avocados and but the broccoli and the strawberries, you know, they don't have an outer shell on them.
I know, but it rinses off.
Yes, exactly. So I will try it. I will.
Yeah, yeah. Let me
I'm
know,
a
please
little
don't
bit
hate me.
germaphobe.
Whatever I said tonight, please don't hate me.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's go back to fruits and veggies. So one of the other things you can do, a lot of people know me as kind of the anti-supplement doctor. And let me tell you why. I think you ought to eat your nutrients. And we have science that just keeps coming out and coming out and coming out that if you get your nutrients in food, you get a big health benefit. And let me give you an example. If you go to the March 2007 American Heart Association recommendations, I was president of the American Heart Association in Boulder, and we used to always tell people to take C and E. All our cardiac patients, we put them on vitamin C and E. And lo and behold, they found out that those cardiac patients taking supplemental C and E had more heart attacks. And B vitamins. So we used to give people folate after they had stents, and we found out that they had more, stents are in heart arteries that opens them up when they're clogged. We found people had more restenosis, more closing up again of that artery if we put them on folate. B12. We see what we call neuropathies from B12. It's nerve damage in the feet. Tryptophan. In Turkey, there were tryptophan supplements. This was about 10 years ago, causing nerve problems. You know, and calcium recently. Does anybody know about some of the hullabaloo about calcium? This has been a really awkward one for doctors. They came out with a study that showed that women who were taking supplemental calcium had an increased risk of heart disease. What in the heck are we supposed to do? I mean, we doctors have just sort of been trained to ignore that one in a way because we don't know what to do with our patients that don't get calcium from their food. And we don't know why, okay? So, you know, whenever I say this, somebody gets upset with me in the audience because they think it's coming out of me, but what I'm telling you is evidence that we have. But we have evidence that if you get those same nutrients in food, you get these huge health benefits. So if you get E, you know, like in your almonds, 24 almonds a day will give you all the vitamin E you need. You have a big heart benefit. If you get your C out of your fruits, you know, you're getting a much more absorbable C. And calcium, the most absorbable calcium source, is going to be out of your cruciferous vegetables. That's your kale, your broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. It's that family. That's a good source of calcium. Dairy has good sources of calcium in it. Dairy seems to have fallen out of favor a little bit. I'm a big milk drinker, but vitamin D is really difficult. And, you know, a lot of people we're finding out are really pretty vitamin D deficient. It's really quite remarkable up here. I have people come in that are skiers and they're really tan, but they're vitamin D deficient because apparently it turns out that getting a little bit of sun up on your head and your chest area isn't enough to absorb adequate amount of vitamin D. You need a little bit more of it. Well, when this was first recognized as an issue, vitamin D was actually in the early 1900s. And what happened in the early 1900s is mankind began to industrialize. And when they did, people started moving indoors. And the earlier part of the 19th century, or the 20th century, excuse me, the 20th century, the 1900s, there were a lot of kids with rickets. And rickets is from vitamin D deficiency, and rickets gives them bowed bones. So when we were young, a lot of us were young, do you remember being told to drink your milk, drink your milk? Well, the reason was they fortified milk with vitamin D. Milk doesn't really have a significant amount of vitamin D in it naturally. Eggs do a bit, but milk doesn't. And so milk is fortified with vitamin D. Your soy milks and your almond milks and things like that, if you like those, you've got to check and see if they're fortified with vitamin D. The only other place you get vitamin D in any kind of quantity is your cold water fish like cod. Cod has a lot of vitamin D in it. Some of your fish oils that you might be taking will probably have some vitamin D in it, but it may not be very much at all. So we find a lot of people are vitamin D deficient. But again, there's some evidence that you're better off if you get it from your food sources. Okay, you know, there's always a vitamin of the moment, and it's vitamin D right now. You know, any of you that are old enough, remember when we put vitamin E on everything? Okay, and then remember when everybody, Linus Pauling, who won the Nobel Prize, but not for his vitamin C research. Everybody was taking high doses of C to prevent colds. You know that no one's ever been able to reproduce his data, and it's felt to just be baloney. In fact, here's an interesting study that was done. They took vitamin C, echinacea, golden seal, zinc, and chicken soup, and they gave it to people with colds, and they measured how their immune system responded to the cold. Did anything make a difference? Chicken soup. It was the only thing that made a difference. It probably has absolutely nothing to do with the chicken. It probably, this is Paula's theory, is that it may just have to do with the heat. You know, maybe we draw more blood cells into, you know, our head and neck area, and it fights infection a little bit better, and has nothing to do with the chicken. You know. So research, you know, one reason that people have lost faith somewhat in modern medicine, and I don't blame you when you guys don't trust us, is that research changes all the time. You know, one year we're saying, oh, this is great, you got to do this. Oh, don't do that anymore, it's dangerous. We told everybody, you know, take aspirin, prevents heart disease. Okay, now do you know we're telling people not to? Okay, unless you have cardiac disease or have had a stroke or heart attack or stent, we tell you not to take aspirin. Why? Because aspirin can make you bleed to death. Okay? You know, it's a little controversial because aspirin still probably has some benefits. We've shown maybe it reduces breast cancer and prostate cancer. Little studies though, no big proof. You know, so when the pendulum swings like that, it's no wonder, you know, we're all left in a sea of wondering. You know, that's one thing, you know, my job is that I feel very strongly that I need to do as a doctor is to try and stay up on stuff. You know, I feel like my job is so you guys don't have to go and try and figure it all out, but, you know, I should be keeping up with the data. And, talking about data, somebody can pull a study out and pretty much make it say anything that they want it to say, and so you've got to learn to have, a pretty good eye for what you should pay attention to and what you shouldn't pay attention to, and it's difficult out there. So on your vegetables and your fruits, eat from the following color groups. White, okay, that would be like cauliflower, blue, blueberries, red, tomatoes, orange, squash, and all the colors, blue, red,
Green.
yellow, green, green veggies. Okay, so try to eat from all the different color groups. Your diet should be colorful. If you don't make any other change in your diet, walking out of here tonight, eat more fruits and vegetables. They say that you should eat 5 to 9 a day with a cup, a serving being a cup, and a cup being filled up with chopped vegetables loose. A half a cup in some circles is a serving if it's chopped fine, with a whole cup being for loose, vegetables. Just pile them on. Now let's go back to being a savvy consumer. What's healthier? Canned veggies, frozen veggies, or fresh veggies?
Frozen.
You know why? When vegetables are frozen, they take that produce at the height of its ripeness. It has the most nutrients. And what they do is they blanch it really quickly. So they actually kind of expose it to heat really quickly. And that does, cut down on some of the nutrients. And then it's flash frozen. When you have fresh stuff, they pick it before it's ripe. And they let it kind of ripen along the way. And during that way, it's exposed to heat. A lot of times heat just through transport. It begins to lose its nutrients.
You have to wash it with soap and water.
And if it's frozen, maybe you don't have to do that. She's not like that girl. Anyway, so, use that to your advantage. So one thing you can do is go to Costco and buy big bags of frozen veggies and throw them in your freezer and just use it as a way to add more vegetables, in your diet.
How about farmers markets?
Farmers market is great. So basically, go to farmers markets, support our local economy. You're getting fresh produce. It's usually organic. It doesn't have a lot of pesticides on it. You don't have to worry about antibiotics and antibiotic-resistant bacteria like you have to do in some meats and poultry, and we'll talk about that too. I think it's great. So basic rule of thumb is, eat things that are, organic when it matters. So look it up on the list, go do that. Don't waste your money when it doesn't make a darn bit of difference. Wash your food, go to farmers markets. That's really the best thing that you can do. And in order to increase your fruits and veggies, get frozen and throw them in the freezer and add them, to all your foods. So, genetically modified foods. Let's talk about those. Where's my husband? Greg is a genetics guy. Genetically altered foods are interesting because a lot of people don't quite understand what they are. There's a lot of fear surrounding them. But here's the facts on genetically altered foods. Really, in third world countries, it's increasing yield. It's increasing yield and people are eating better. So that's a good thing. So there's a lot of good things about it. Genetically altered foods are really made to be more pest resistant. Okay? There isn't anything about altering that food genetically that's going to hurt you genetically. Okay? So they really aren't bad for you. Okay? And they do increase yield in developing countries, and there tends to be some, benefit to that. So whatever you believe about it, there are some advantages to it. Science has kind of made some things that are going to increase yield and nutrition. Meats that are given antibiotics. That's a big issue because antibiotics being given to cattle is increasing antibiotic resistance. I don't buy organic in meats, I think, because I'm lazy and I make my husband do most of the shopping. But maybe we should, in some. That's another area where you might want to support organic. Because that is probably a real risk, is antibiotics. So when you get a cold, don't go to the doctor and ask for an antibiotic. Okay. Let's see, superfoods. Everybody know what superfoods are? The most nutrient-packed foods. Pull up a list on the internet. So I'm giving you a couple things to do on the internet, or suggesting a couple things. Look up what you should eat organic and what you shouldn't, and just kind of memorize that list. Pull up the list of superfoods. What are they? Broccoli, blueberries, kale,
Chocolate.
chocolate. You know what? I know why Ray
Dark chocolate. Cow.
because he knew I was going to say this. I told him, I said, you need to go buy some dark chocolate kisses, a whole bunch of bags of them, because I'm going to pass them around. So everybody gets chocolate. Because chocolate has a lot of antioxidants, and it's actually really good for you. Yeah, so chocolate's really good.
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate, yeah, it's the dark chocolate. Because 65% and higher are cocoa. All right, so those are some of the superfoods. Salmon, fish. Let's talk about fish. What's healthy fish? You know how to figure out? Sardines. Why are sardines? Well, that's true. So another place you can get calcium is canned fish, like sardines and salmon. And so if you like tuna fish sandwiches, get salmon salad sandwiches. That's a way you can increase your calcium. So why does tuna get mercury, and why does salmon not get mercury? Do we know? This is all you need to know about fish. You want fish with a small mouth. Okay? Big mouth fish, shark, tuna, eat little fish, and they get lots of mercury. It accumulates in their body. Okay? So smallmouth fish. You want fish that swim, because fish that crawl on the bottom of the ocean also eat what falls to the bottom of the ocean. Okay? However, they're not unhealthy. Shellfish have selenium in them, and that's very heart healthy. But generally, they're not the cleanest fish because of what they eat that's on the bottom of the ocean. And then wild fish, because the farming industry for some fish farming practices needs to change. There is debate about whether the PCBs and the plastic in the tanks leach into food. You know, you think that's science, but we don't actually know for sure whether that's harmful. BPAs and PCBs leaching in, but they have some kind of nasty feed practices. Some of the feed isn't very healthy. And so eat fish that have a small mouth, swim, and are wild. And also Alaska's biggest industry is fishing, and we should support them. If you've ever been to Alaska, it's a good place to support.
But halibut, doesn't halibut hang down at the bottom?
Does it hang on the bottom? Does halibut have a big mouth? I don't actually know.
I don't know.
Does anybody know what a halibut looks like?
Big round flat thing.
Right, but yeah, so that would be a fish that would be sort of generally on the bottom of the ocean. And then fish that generally are healthier for you are the cold water fish, because they have more of the omega-3 in them. And so that's salmon. Everybody knows salmon's got omega-3 in it. So does tuna, but tuna also has mercury. If you eat a lot of it, you can accumulate that. By the way, if you had high mercury levels, because I measure a lot of mercury levels and found them high in people that are tuna eaters, pretty much if they give up tuna for a month, it goes back to zero. So it's not like you have to worry I'm poisoned with it, just, start eating less of it. A long time ago, they said pregnant women shouldn't eat it more than once a week, but the rest of us could eat it 3 times a week. Really? So I don't like tuna. A lot of people do, but just eat it infrequently. You will clear some of that mercury, but it's probably not the healthiest thing you have in your body. Anyway, so that's it on fish. Let's see, looking through my slides, which did I know? Ooh, fats. Oh, sugar. Let's talk about sugar. Okay, so you need to learn to be a label reader. If anything ends in OSE, O-S-E, it's a sugar. Maltose, fructose, lactose, okay, it's a sugar. So if you're eating a processed food and that's added in there, you're getting sugar. Fruit juice, sweetened with fruit juice. Is that better? No, it's really just sugar. And our body converts everything into glucose to be used for fuel. And so those are just another way of adding sugar to your food. Corn syrup is another, pretty bad. Honey, brown sugar, fruit juice, they pretty much have the same nutrient value. Well, fruit juice not quite, because it may have some of the vitamins in it from the fruit. But sugar, honey, brown sugar, they're all about the same nutrient value. Now people, there's always somebody who's a honey aficionado stand up and say, but it has. Well, it does have trace nutrients in it. And does honey, if you eat it from the region, make you less susceptible to allergies? Maybe. Maybe, actually, because what we do when we give people allergy shots is we give them small amounts of the thing they're allergic to until we make them immune. So it does make some scientific sense. Whether it really works really well in reality, I don't know. But, I don't have a problem with honey. Just don't eat a lot of sugars. They're not really particularly great for you. Alcohol is sugar, so remember that. Good fats. Here's another thing you want to remember. You want MUFAs, PUFAs, and omega-3. What's a MUFA and a PUFA? So a MUFA is a monounsaturated fat. And some things have both MUFAs and PUFAs in them, but basically they're going to be monounsaturated fat, olive, peanut, canola, avocado, nut, and seed oils. Those are healthy for you. PUFA, polyunsaturated, vegetable oils, safflower, corn, sunflower, soy, peanut. Some poultry actually has a little bit in it. Omega-3 fatty acids, that's going to be in fish oil, and it's going to be in flaxseed, and flaxseed oil. The bad fats, it's really easy. Nutrition isn't hard. If you're ever really stuck, say, would that have been available if I walked out of my cave a million years ago? You get fruit, you don't get fruit juice. Why is fruit better? It's got fiber in it. You're getting all the other nutrients that are in the fruit. You're getting whole grains, things that you have to grind up, so it's going to be better for you. When they ate game, it was skinny little game, didn't have a lot of fat in it. So saturated fat is mostly in meat and dairy. So the meats, like your red meats, have a lot of saturated fat. Cholesterol in your body comes mostly from saturated fat, not cholesterol-containing foods. Eggs, there's always some researcher out there that's convinced that eggs raise your cholesterol. I'm trained as a lipidologist. I have all these things like kinesiology, lipidology, and internal medicine. What are you? Well, lipidology is a cholesterol specialist. So the National Lipid Association, I did their master's level course. And really, what happens is saturated fat goes into your body. And if your liver genetically is revved up that it's going to make a lot of cholesterol, that saturated fat, you're going to have cholesterol. And sometimes even if you eat a great diet, you're still going to have high cholesterol. I bet there are people in here that are really frustrated because their cholesterol is high, and they eat really well and they exercise. That's where your genetics comes in. Remember, good health, good nutrition, exercise, and deal with your genetics, because that'll kill you too. So mostly it's saturated fat that creates cholesterol. It's still a little debatable whether dietary cholesterol that's in meat and eggs really significantly increases your cholesterol level. I used to say absolutely not. I'm reading all the time on the subject, and there's some debate on it. There was a guy recently who came out with a study that said, no, eggs absolutely cause high cholesterol, because they did a study and they looked at all these guys who ate a lot of eggs, and they had high cholesterol. Well, what did they cook their eggs in? Did they have bacon? I mean, when I actually looked at the study, they didn't control for those things. I just thought it was so stupid, so I completely discounted that. I eat eggs. I think they're great. They're really, good protein. They got a lot of good stuff in them. I think eggs are fine, in my opinion.
Do you wash them?